Imagine that a millennia-old story, passed down from generation to generation, not only conceals the grandeur of an ancient culture, but also secrets that transcend time. This is exactly what we find in the story of Joseph and Egypt, a tale full of mysteries and questions, especially about the identity of the pharaoh who ruled Egypt during Joseph's rise. Joseph, a second-rate ruler, went from being a prisoner to becoming the second most powerful man in the greatest power of that era. For centuries, scholars, archaeologists, theologians, and curious minds have tried to unravel this enigma. Who was the pharaoh that met Joseph? And more importantly, why did Egypt and its pharaohs play such a crucial role not only in Joseph's life, but also in the history of a people who would later become the nation of Israel? This video will take you on a fascinating journey, crossing the boundaries between the Bible and Egyptology, blending faith with historical and archaeological facts. Along the way, we will examine the pharaohs of Joseph's time, explore new perspectives, and even suggest fresh viewpoints that could change the way you see these ancient figures. Before diving into the mystery of the pharaoh, it's worth recapping the story of Joseph, the man who, according to the biblical account, went from a simple shepherd and despised brother to a man of prominence in Egypt. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob, and of all his sons, the most loved by his father. But what began as a story of affection and favoritism quickly turned into tragedy. His brothers, consumed by jealousy, sold him as a slave to Ishmaelite merchants, who took him to Egypt. For years, Joseph endured humiliation, falsely accused of attempted rape, and imprisoned. However, his obedience to God and his moral integrity were rewarded, and Joseph was called upon to interpret the pharaoh's dream, an event that would change his life forever. The pharaoh, tormented by mysterious dreams of fat and lean cows, had his crisis resolved by Joseph, who interpreted the dreams as a divine warning about 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom and grace, the pharaoh appointed him vizier, the second highest position in Egypt. This story, which has resonated through millennia, places the pharaoh at the center of the narrative. However, the question of who this pharaoh was still intrigues scholars today. After all, it wasn't just one pharaoh who ruled Egypt during Joseph's lifetime, but rather a succession of kings marking different points in Egyptian history. Now, we enter a realm filled with debate and speculation. To answer the question of who the pharaoh of Joseph's time was, we must combine biblical chronology with Egyptology. The answer is not simple, and scholars differ in their analyses, but most agree that the pharaoh who ruled when Joseph arrived in Egypt was Amenemhat I, a pharaoh of the 12th dynasty. His rise to the throne and the events that marked his reign are essential for understanding the context in which Joseph was elevated to a prominent position. Amenemhat I was a ruler responsible for restoring order and consolidating power in Egypt, putting the empire back on track after a period of instability. This pharaoh was crucial to the historical context of Egypt, but to better understand the relationship between Joseph and the pharaoh, we must also look at Amenemhat III's successors, particularly Senusret III, who took power after his father's death and was responsible for a period of great prosperity, but also challenges. Senusret I was a pharaoh who not only inherited a prosperous Egypt, but also had to deal with a crisis that would transform the history of Egypt and the entire Middle East. His reign, from 1971 to 1926 BCE, saw Egypt achieve significant prosperity. During his rule, Egypt expanded its borders, and he also implemented new administrative policies aimed at centralizing power and maintaining stability. It was also during Senusret II's reign that the famous dream of the fat and lean cows occurred, a dream that would later be interpreted by Joseph as a forewarning of years of abundance followed by years of scarcity. The prophecy came true, and Egypt had to face 7 years of famine, which caused great hardship for the population. This is where Joseph's leadership becomes even more relevant. During these years of scarcity, he He was instrumental in ensuring the distribution of food and preventing a greater catastrophe, not only in Egypt, but also in Canaan, where his own family was facing a grain shortage. The 7 years of famine are undoubtedly one of the most dramatic and critical moments in Egyptian history. The pharaoh who presided over this period was Senusret III, who ruled Egypt from 1878 BCE to 1840 BCE. His reign was marked by several challenges, including the severe consequences of the food scarcity, which caused an unprecedented economic and social crisis in the country. In Egyptian texts, we see that this was a period of great instability, with rebellions and uprisings in various regions of Egypt. It is important to note that at the same time, the population was being affected by a major shortage of resources. This aligns with the biblical description of the 7 years of famine, during which Joseph, at the pharaoh's command, bought land and property, completely restructuring the country's economy to ensure Egypt's survival. Under Joseph's leadership, Egypt not only survived the crisis, but emerged stronger, with the pharaoh consolidating his power through intelligent resource management, including acquiring Egyptian land in exchange for food. This moment undoubtedly solidified Joseph's position as one of the most important figures in Egyptian history. Joseph became a key figure not only for the Egyptians, but also for the Israelites. His interpretation of dreams was not just an act of wisdom, it was the fulfillment of divine providence that brought God's plan to fruition, saving not only Egypt, but also his own family. The way Joseph managed resources, storing grain during the years of abundance, and ensuring the survival of the people during the famine was one of the greatest demonstrations of leadership in history. The Bible presents Joseph as a God-fearing man who saw God's hand in every situation, from his being sold as a slave to his rise to power. His story is a testament to how faithfulness to God can lead to victory, even in the most adverse circumstances. The story of Joseph is rich not only in historical content, but also in spiritual and leadership lessons. As we face our own challenges, we can find inspiration in Joseph's action, his patience, his commitment to justice, and above all, his unwavering trust in God. Joseph's administration during the years of famine teaches us how leadership should be efficient, compassionate, and strategic. He not only saved Egypt, but also provided a future for those willing to work and trust in the process. Furthermore, the way he forgave his brothers, who had sold him as a slave, reflects a remarkable example of reconciliation and grace. Now that we've explored the key pharaohs of Joseph's time, an important question arises. What can we learn from this mystery on a deeper level? Why has this story resonated through the century? Historically, the pharaohs of Egypt leave us with an impressive legacy of architecture, culture, and governance. But if we look at Joseph's story from a spiritual perspective, we can see how the challenges he faced were, in fact, divine opportunities for a greater purpose. The mystery of the Pharaoh of Joseph is not just about who was ruling, but also how divine providence moves through generations to fulfill a larger plan. Joseph and the pharaohs of his time are figures that invite us to reflect on our own faith and ability to handle life's challenges, whether in politics, business, or family matters. While the mystery of the identity of Joseph's pharaoh may never be fully resolved, the legacy of Joseph and the message he conveys remain clear. His story teaches us that, even in the worst circumstances, God's providence is always with us, guiding us through challenges. Egypt was transformed by Joseph's wisdom and leadership, and to this day, this story continues to inspire and challenge those who seek to understand how faith and wisdom can shape the future. Leave your mark, share this story, and continue the journey of learning. Who knows, you might also be the Joseph of your generation, leading with wisdom and faith.